So I do have 4 of my friends here who are going to be sharing quite a bit on how technology is going to be enabling better consumer insights for today and tomorrow. I'm not going to introduce anybody, their names are up there, they're quite well known as well. So without further ado, I'll just directly get into the conversation here. So I'm going to leave the the forum pretty open because I'm sure there are different perspectives. So I'm going to be like asking a few questions, and we will hear from them about their perspective and their experiences. So thank you everybody. Great to have you on board. So one of the first questions I have in mind is, in today's era of technology, and technology is anything and everything. So in today's era of technology, as an organization, how do you think technology in general would enable better funneling of consumer data and insights for an organization's use? That's sort of a generally, I would say it's like a very open question in the sense technology is technology. There are thousands of technologies today, but I would like to hear about your own personal views of this. So Manish, you want to go first? I'll start with the person furthest away from me.
Okay, thank you, Hari. Good afternoon, everyone. I think very relevant question, Hari, and if I talk on behalf of research fraternity because I belong to that segment, I see this helping at 3 levels. One, at a very operational efficiency level, and before I get into it, let me throw some of the statistics or some of the data. Being a researcher, operations takes almost 70 to 80% of our time in any research environment, research project environment. It also almost is half of the cost of any research project, so to say. And if you look at the world of research, which has been there for almost, organic research world has been there for almost 100 years, the processes hasn't evolved exponentially. And there's a huge possibility of how we can deploy technology at that very level to maybe make it far more efficient, both from a speed point of view, quality point of view, consistency point of view, and cost point of view. That's level 1, where we can really deploy technology. The second level where technology can deploy, and again in the research environment, for a lot of work, which clients in today's world, because it's becoming so dynamic, they need quick answers, but an accurate answer to go in the marketplace. Can we again deploy technology from a lot of productized solutions rather than a very humanized way of servicing clients? Can we look at a very productized solution part of it? That's the second level. And at the very third level is more bringing in different data points rather than being restricted to one singular way of looking at a business problem. Can we look at different data points, maybe different data worlds, so to say, the digital world as well, the research world, kind of bring them all together, maybe from a synthesis point of view, and use some of the technologies to address the business problem better, which then maybe for the business buyer's point of view, they are also not then compartmentalizing in a way that, okay, this can only get addressed through research, this can get only through digital world, this can get addressed through analytics world. It is a business problem I am dealing with. The CXOs or the CMOs of the world is no more bothered about, will you answer my problem through research data or some other data? Can we bring all of those 3 together and maybe deploy technology and make it more effective in a way?
That's great. I mean, before we pass on, do you have any specific examples around it that you can throw?
Sure. So the very first example which I talk about, the operation efficiency, we can look at a very traditional technology, but we can look at newer technologies. In the AI world, there's a technology called robotic process automation. Now, by its sheer name, it can be very well deployed in the processes part of it, the how we design, how we script, how we look at the data, and how we address the business problem to a degree. It'll solve at 2 levels. One, again, from time point of view, really crunching that time exponentially. And second, from a quality and consistency point of view, you're bringing in far better, which is also enabling our research consultant to really play that role, which is the consultant role, rather than spending a lot of time on the project management part of that. So that's a specific example probably I can quote.
Interesting. Thank you. That's a very interesting point. If I quote you.
Yeah. So I think just building on what was said earlier, from an internal organization perspective, I think anything that brings efficiency from a process perspective, there are a lot of takers for that, because I think every organization would want to be in a position where an internal insight team or sort of the teams that are structured around it, they are adding value more in terms of a business thinking and a strategic process rather than being project managers. So there is a role of technology in terms of enabling that to happen. I guess the other angle that we are seeing is that technology can enable access of newer kind of insights which traditional methods would have struggled to deliver. And the emergence of technologies, whether it is IoT or wearable devices or all these evolutions that are happening, means that organizations are now in a position to access a newer kind of insight that was not available before. So I'll give an example in a more specific study context. So let's say if you are in a pharmaceutical kind of environment and you are looking at how does a drug impact a user over a period of time, you can now use a wearable device as a mechanism that sort of tracks the person longitudinally in terms of like post consumption of a particular drug or a treatment mechanism. How is the patient reacting to so you're collecting real time data like a heartbeat or number of steps taken to kind of assess how the product is being performing. And when I look at 15 years of how it would have been done, the same person would have been called at frequent intervals, all the measures would have been taken and recorded. But now the machine can sort of help give access to that kind of thing. And that for me is a newer, almost real-time data access, which technology can enable massively. And just the access to newer range of insights, I think is a big deliverable from technology.
Right. That's very interesting indeed, especially the, the medical angle to it and how it can make a difference to the organization. I think I'll pass it over to Malik.
Thanks. I think my colleagues here have made some very interesting observations, starting with or focused on operational efficiency. So I'll not touch that part. And caveat, I will speak from a client side perspective, having been a banker all my life. So I'll tell you how from a client or an organization perspective, all these emerging technologies are impacting. And let me try and distill it into three. There are many more. But the first is customer centricity. And I'm sure this sounds extremely cliched. You've heard it 1,001 times. I've probably heard it 10,000 times in my career. But let me explain why this is different this time. The second is much better and contextual understanding of the customer, much richer profiling. And the third is real time. And again, the caveat is these are not the only things. There is much more, quite a bit I covered yesterday in my presentation and talk as well. But the first is customer-centric view. If you look at banks, it's not that they didn't have data. They had a lot of customer and transaction data for many, many years. But you look at the legacy systems or the way large global banks and multinationals or insurers have evolved. There's always been a channel-centric view, a product-centric view. It was always very siloed. So you had a different system for credit cards, a different system for banking, and then you had your relationship management system. And I've been a part of all those big data projects, so I can tell you firsthand. Now you are able to really, and for 20 years, organizations have been saying we need to have a customer-centric view and not an internal siloed view. But for the first time, you are able to bring it to life, marry all these together, and really create a customer-centric perspective. So to my mind, as cliched as it sounds, it's a big thing for large legacy global organizations, especially global organizations. And I'll give an example. As a global banker and also as a global client of a couple of banks, I have moved and worked in different countries. It was quite ironic that each time I would go to a different country, I had to open the same account all over again. And even my internet banking and mobile banking experience was different in different countries. So, I mean, what do you talk about being a global organization or a global bank when the customer experience is so fragmented? Forget the channels. I'm not even going into that. When you call up phone banking, you have to do a different way of verifying yourself versus internet versus mobile versus ATM versus walking into a branch. So that's the first part. The second important thing is you really start getting a very rich and detailed contextual profiling. And let me quickly talk through that. Again, as I said, banks and insurers, especially banks, have had a lot of customer data for decades now. So it's not a new thing. BI has been around as a function and customer insights. But the difference is now we have much richer access to unstructured data, social media data, mobile data. You talk about wearable data, geo mapping, beacons. There are a host of ways in which you are able to understand, profile, segment, and Again, this may sound a bit cliched, but the segment of one is no longer just a vision statement, but it's becoming a reality for large organizations. So and I can give you another live example. It's happened to me. I'm sure it happens to all of you. I was coming here in the morning and I booked my Grab. And the moment I booked my Grab, I got an SMS from Citibank saying, hey, you booked your Grab now. Why don't you convert that by using Pay with Points? Now, this Pay with Points program has been around for 25 years, and I have been one of those people who initially started it. But the fact that you are able to do it in such a contextual manner is something which is a completely different perspective. It was for me. It was not a generic random SMS landing on my mobile or an email. It was specific for me knowing what I did. And the third, which is related to that, is real time, which again, we've heard about, but the fact is I just narrated this example. It doesn't have to wait for profiling me, getting a data dump, running an end of day batch, etc., to understand me. It knows where I am. It knows what transaction I did. It knows how I paid. And again, we spoke about ambient banking and ambient technologies yesterday, but this is all happening in the background. As a customer, I have no idea, nor do I really care. What it is doing for me is it is bringing, as we always keep saying as marketeers and market research professionals, right message, right time, right place. This is a classic example. So I think these three things from a customer centricity point of view are really fundamental, and they will be progressively more important for consumer centric organizations going forward.
Thank you so much. Before I pass it over to Roy, this is a very interesting topic that Malik raised, and especially in the marketing scenario, because I was planning to ask this question about how technology enables better insights for marketing, so we'll come to that. But I think a lot of these are basically, I would say, waypoints or milestones that one can talk about when it comes to enabling technology for better insights. And I think we should touch upon the DMPs of the world, all of that, I think, in a few minutes. But I think for now, I'll pass it over to Roy. He's from Tencent, so would love to hear your points of view from the Tencent world.
Yeah, so hi guys, I'm Roy Priestley. I work in P&G, and now I work in Tencent. First, I would like to thank Malik. I think I really learned a lot from your point of view. For this discussion, I don't really think I have an answer, but I have my observation and questions I would like to discuss about it. So before we talk about how we can embrace technology to bring them to insight, I think first we need to understand how technology has changed the marketing landscape. I see there is two things. The marketing landscape has been changing. One is external. External, like 10 years ago, for most of the FMCG or a lot of commercial business, we are still using the TV model, TV and big channel model, right? We tell consumers what they want. And then they have to look at the TV because they don't want to miss the prison break. But today, has been changing because we have multiple devices, right? If you switch to advertisement, I switch my device. Then I can surf on my Facebook or Twitter. In China, it's like a Weibo and WeChat. Yeah, until there's something like Game of Thrones is on, okay, I will look at it. So this is, I think, has been changing the TV model from the content marketing model. It's like consumers can choose their content. I think this is how today the new device, new apps, new media environment has changed the behavior. That's where we introduced the new technology like social listening. I want to know how my content works. But as there are more people realize that, then would use a bunch of content there. You have YouTube, Snapchat, everything. Then consumers can still jump from content to content. And every time I need to figure out, okay, how to vote them again, right? They only like look at my video and then left. They don't buy no stuff. I don't like it. And the way is, maybe next thing is you need to be the friend or you become an idol of your consumer. Like what my favorite person, right? Steve Jobs says, he doesn't need to entertain me. He show up and say something, I pay much attention to it. So this is where like in China, the Xiaomi cell phone, somebody may know, right? This is the fans marketing. They turn their product, they open the whole R&D process of their product and recruit a few very enthusiastic consumers to co-create with them. And then in the end, before their product, their first cell phone launch, they already have like 500,000 fans expecting them to come. So when they say, okay, now it's available on Taobao or on Tmall.com, then in an hour, it's all booked. Yeah, I think this is the new era of fans marketing. That's where we need to introduce the new technology for the insights, like what you said. It's our CRM system. This is where it comes to life. Yeah, I think this is the external environment changing that I see. And internal is also changing. It's like previously we gathered the insight and data mostly from the external way, like survey or sales data. But today, we have much more data, like CRM data. We may launch our apps. We have our official accounts, right? It's all data. Then we need to introduce our data management platform. Otherwise, you can really get all of it. Yes, so I think this is the landscape I see changing, and this is also where I see when we are seeing all those like AR, VR, AI, what am I supposed to do? We need to take a step back and look at what is the real model that our business is doing now, and then how to use the technology.
Thank you, Roy. Another interesting perspective. So that brings me to the next question, which is again something I think we have sort of started gravitating towards marketing a little bit already, technology, consumer insights, and marketing. So before I go into the next question, I do remember reading somewhere that these days there are mansions in the US being bought over WeChat or Weibo or something. I was reading such a news, and I'm wondering where the world is going. If I can actually buy a mansion for $1 million over WeChat, firstly I need to have the money, of course, but I would be in a totally different place. And I think that again is one of those perspectives that sort of makes me think, what is technology enabling today, and what the Weibos or WeChats and Tencents of the world must be having in terms of real consumer behavior insights due to the way the behavior is changing, or the way consumer behavior is being changed because of the way technology is evolving. So it's a chicken and egg story. So what is really changing? Is it the behavior changing, or is the way the behavior is being made to change by how technology is evolving? And so therefore, my next question is, when it comes to marketing, which is, I talked about measurement a while ago, assessing the impact of marketing dollars, etc. Now, I think that is an area which has very close nexus to connection to insights, because without insights, there's no marketing. How will marketing spend millions of dollars if they are unable to understand their consumer better? That's where insights come into play, and therefore how technology enables insights, and how all the different systems from the acquisition to the website to the CRM, why all of that should be connected so that they speak to each other, so that there are consumer insights that can be activated. So therefore, my question again back to Manish is, how do you think today's marketing organizations are making use of technology to derive better insights? Do you think they are? If you think they are, how? If you don't think they are, then why?
I should have noted all of those questions, by the way.
That's like a battery of questions.
Probably before I answer that, Hari, listening to all those three gentlemen sitting here and
Yeah.
coming from the other side of the world, which is more from the corporate side and representing the agency. On one hand, I see this to be a challenge and a threat. Whenever and this is not the first time I'm hearing these point of views. There have been in the last few years, I've been hearing a point of view about so much different kind of data and technology, how it is changing the web. And where we as an insight function, are we kind of keeping pace with that kind of a change happening? So I see that as a threat, but I see there's a tremendous opportunity. If I compare the insight world with all of the other data-driven decision-making world, insight still has a lot many more years of experience. So it's the grandfather of the data kind of a world. So that's a great opportunity. And to your question about marketing, look, yes, absolutely, marketing are creating those alternate environments to make those decisions, and probably much better decision than what they were able to do a few years back because of certain different data sources, certain different technology. And that again bring back to the same question, how insight as a function is adapting and deploying technology to kind of integrate to the marketing current requirement. And I go back to my previous argument, I see that again two way. I saw some of the presentations today and yesterday, and I'm very, very happy to see that there are alternatives way of providing solutions to a business problem. Where I still see as an industry we are lacking is is the way we have been servicing our clients all these years. Why are we not really deploying technology heavily in the way we have been servicing? So take it to the next level, the way we have been servicing. Why can't we look at an artificial intelligence or some other forms of technology in the way we have been servicing? So a classical example is he as a client, if he has got used to looking at an individual from an agency side to service him, he'll always want that individual to be servicing him because he knows that that's a person who holds all the understanding of the client. Can I use technology in some ways to mitigate, if not completely, to some extent, that situation? Can Insight adapt that? And the second point, which you talked about, how marketing are using other technology and other data sources. Insight is again at a very pivotal point in adapting different data world and marrying with their own world to provide better answers to the client. So rather than just focusing on a typical primary research or a secondary research, can we bring in the digital data also? Can we bring in the transaction data? I think he just talked about the customer centricity. There's a business problem, and can research world evolve to look at other data points and marry that with their own data points to provide a better answer to the client? So yes, the world is changing, world is evolving, Insight is adapting, but probably we need to adapt faster to continue to be relevant in the marketplace. That's my answer. Yeah.
Right, thanks. Deepak?
I'll just build upon this. I think organizations are now at a level where probably they have more data than they can actually handle. I mean, there is, at any point in time, there are simultaneous streams of existing data and new data being generated. I think the struggle that I see, having been both on client side and on the agency side, is to find a common narrative that stitches together these various data streams that are coming through. 10 years ago, a brand manager might have access to, let's say, a brand tracking data, a retail audit data, household panel data,
Yep.
maybe some media data, and just 3 or 4.
Yep.
It was easier to stitch some sort of a narrative. Today, if you ask a brand manager, apart from these 4 that still exist, I have my Facebook insights, Google Analytic insights, I have,
Twitter.
if there's an IoT kind of thing, my CRM, my Salesforce, SAP, they are now drowning in data, and now the struggle is actually to find a stitching together. I think the more progressive organizations sort of are realizing this, in the sense that, look, we are now at a point where we are drowning in data, but we are not drowning in insights. How do you extract the value out of them? So the way some progressive organizations have evolved is there is almost a foresight to invest in things like data infrastructure, data management, that can at least bring all the things in one central place to begin with, rather than collating it from 30 resources and CSV files and emails and all that. The first level would be to just come to a central point, so that at least you can look at what they are looking together. And I think the other one is a bit of openness to almost look at it as almost a test and learn mentality. The truth is that even though there is a lot more data sources, not all of them may be equally useful. Some of them might just be noise. It's really not adding any value. Yeah. So just being a little bit more open in terms of trying with something, not trying with something, and just having a bit of test and learn, A/B testing kind of mentality, which is sort of the startup approach kind of thing. I think that sort of thinking is starting to come into organizations, where we go into a situation saying that, look, I have these 50 data streams, probably 35 are not useful, and that's okay. But with the 15 that I have, I'm in a better position to sort of stitch a narrative. I think the last, I will just say from an opportunity perspective, from an insights sort of as a function, is that I think we are in a very unique position to maybe for the first time evolve at a faster rate, because your data proliferation is now going to become a fact of life. Everyone has 4 devices. The TV model doesn't work anymore. Everything is moving omni-channel, 100% digital kind of thing. So the insights community has a role, or potentially an opportunity, to be ahead of the curve, and maybe be a little bit more open, and have the spirit of experimentation to kind of go through the newer problems that we face today.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Malik, I'm sure you'll have some interesting perspective here.
So I think Deepak had made some very great points and comments here. I just want to add to some of them, and also share a slightly contrarian perspective. My own experience is that so much of data and so much of technology for large, and again, pardon me, but my perspective will come from the worldview of large, complex global organizations, where there is I would say, the maximum opportunity and maximum challenge. And let me try and address both of these separately. So the first part, I think Deepak was very eloquent about, and we've all heard this term called data deluge. So it is a challenge for everybody, especially for large organizations. More data doesn't mean much, or big data doesn't mean much. It may just mean more confusion and more analysis paralysis, more complexity, more reports yielding to nothing. So obviously, everybody is beginning to realize that the distillation has to be from data to insights, and that's where the rubber meets the road. So that is a challenge, and the challenge is growing exponentially, as you said. Whether agencies or the insights team or the BI teams within organizations, they were never geared for something like this. For 20 years, they worked with transaction data or the CRM data. Suddenly, they are bombarded with half a dozen data streams, web stream data, this, that. They've never, and most of these guys probably don't have a technology background. They are not the millennials who understand it or use it. So everybody's trying to change, but yes, it is a significant challenge, and much more so than what it was in the past. On the flip side, there is an equal opportunity, and I think you alluded to creating common data platforms, whether we talk about technologies like Hadoop, etc., which allow for an ecosystem where all of these, or an infrastructure where you can really first bring in and standardize all your data together, and then you can really get a much richer view and a much richer perspective. And I want to go a bit beyond just marketing. Let me share a couple of, again, examples to show how, if you get it right, or even partially right, whether it is in terms of test and learn or pilots, etc., you can really have, change the narrative. So the first is, this idea of omni-channel. A decade back, there weren't so many platforms or so many, data streams. Today, you have so much more, and especially in the context of click and brick organizations, banking, etc., customers still do. They have an omni-channel or a multi-channel pathing, And so far, we never had a way to understand it. So you were seeing, oh, customers are doing some transactions, or oh, customers are, kind of getting delinquent, or they are getting disengaged, or they are likely to kind of go away from our system. But it was a very channel-specific view. So you saw phone banking differently, you saw internet banking, and it developed. So you had your funnel management and all of that, but that was all limited to, from impressions to output. That was very specific to digital to mobile. Phone banking has its own view. Branches were always struggling to make sense. And quite a few banks have started these pilots where we are able to bring all of this data together and really map omni-channel data together from a customer and I'm going back to the customer centricity point of view. Trust me, it ends up being so powerful. Suddenly you have insights which you didn't even think of in the past. So you are seeing a customer about to go out from your system or become inactive, or you have triggers that this person may end up being a delinquent, but you never had any idea of what the pathing was, the omni-channel pathing was. So the fact that, as an example, maybe the customer went to the branch, didn't get proper service, called up the phone banking, wasn't satisfactorily resolved, maybe wanted a fee reversal or something, went online, to try it, couldn't really get a satisfactory response, and then the customer is out. Earlier, you saw these as very disjointed, discrete events, and you were not able to make sense. You saw, 3 channels, point A, point B, and then the customer going out of your system. Suddenly, it all makes so much sense. So it becomes exponentially powerful. And let me give you another example. This is all from, customer experience or marketing or retention point of view, but you can have very interesting and very different new use cases. Like in the world of financial services, some of you may be aware, for the past couple of years, we have this trend called as social credit modeling. And I'll just spend a minute, perhaps it's not entirely relevant to all of you, but there are parallels which you can draw for your respective industries. So for 30, 40, 50 years, the world of lending was always based on a certain standard model. There was a black box, you put in customer credit data, and then a score came out, a FICO score or whatever. Nobody knew, not even probably the credit guys or only the credit guys. And that's how the whole engine kept on running. But you know what, in emerging markets like India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, you realize that most customers didn't, even with the advent of credit bureaus, they didn't have any records in the system. So you ran something through a black box. You didn't know whether there was a good customer or a bad customer. And again, I'm saying there, the use cases of this go beyond just lending and credit to building various profiling. But the idea is you were using a certain methodology which worked for you, but it excluded more than half the population. Now suddenly with credit, with social behavior, with Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter behavior, you can start getting data points on their occupation, on how their career trajectories have evolved, their networks, what they do with their friends, what they buy, etc., etc. I've seen interesting companies which use mobile data. They are able to see what kind of billing you have on your mobile, if it is prepaid, etc. When do you make your payment through your texts? And suddenly your understanding of this 50 or 60% of this population segment becomes so much more holistic than you ever had in the past. So you are actually able to start making lending decisions based on this kind of data. Now think about it for a moment. I know most of you are not from banking, but if you can use holistic or alternative data for something as critical as lending decisions, I'm sure it can find applicability in a lot of other use cases. So the challenge is obviously there's just too much data and people are getting swarmed. But if you can start even making sense of bits and pieces of it in specific context, what you have is not 1 + 1 = 2, but 1 + 1 = 11.
11, yeah. Very exhaustive perspective indeed. Roy, over to you.
Maybe just one quick comment. It's like, and these days you now have to deal with an additional thing is that if somebody is unhappy with service, he will tell to 10,000 people on Facebook first before going out.
Yeah, of course. It's just take a matter of seconds before your reputation gets spoiled. Roy, sorry.
Yeah, so just to build on Deepak's point of view, I think not all data are necessary, right? So maybe only 20% is needed. But which 20%? I think that still really rely on the commercial team. Commercial team, it talks about the marketing, R&D, and the market research team. Like, still back to the question is what we are doing. What is our marketing model, right? So say, for example, if you're a small business, probably your marketing model is to generate content, then you need to ensure that your content can create a social buzz and then people would go to the e-commerce website and buy it. But if you are like a prestige skincare, right? So probably you use the celebrity superstar to create emotion bonding, and then below the line, you don't need people to buy a lot in the department store, because for the first time they will try it. After that, they can go to buy online. Then you know what you're doing, and then around that, you need to build your inside model, your inside system. Like you use your CRM, your social listening, or data management platform, then generate a user insight to test if all those chains are connected together. Yeah, so that's what I think how marketing should do it. So some marketing do it well, some do not. I think it still relies on if they're really clear what they're doing and then how it might work. With that, build a measurement and insight system.
Right. Great perspective. So I had half a dozen questions stored, but then I suppose we don't have time. I've been shown the card. So I think we've got another 5 minutes to go, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to be throwing open to questions. Yep. Somebody out there? You want me to pass this mic?
So earlier you were talking about content marketing and how the model from traditional TV and sort of models of push advertising has really changed. One of the things I think that's challenging, and there's a lot of evidence that suggests people that engage with content from a brand are already really engaged with the brand. They think about the brand, they use the brand, they're excited about the brand. They love the brand, maybe. Doubtful, but maybe. And those are the people that look at content marketing. How do you think about reaching audiences that don't care about you? Because that's the path to growth, more customers, right? Making the business bigger. But these are the people that don't look at your ads, that don't think about you, that don't understand the relevancy, none of that stuff. I think this is why 1% of people click on ads on the internet. I think it's the reason I didn't remember one single Facebook ad I saw today. I'm sure there were lots in my newsfeed. I didn't see any of them because none of that stuff is stuff I'm using today. So my question is, how do you think about the challenge of finding new people knowing that they're not looking at your stuff in an environment where there's not as much push marketing as there has historically been?
Goes first.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. Actually, this what I was about to talk is when you launch a content, if it is good enough, it will become viral, right? So he would influence his friends if he reposts it on like Twitter, on Facebook, things like that. Yeah, and I think it also brings a very important idea into this new era of marketing model, which is consumer is not only your consumer, but it's also your advocate. So like you need to treat them like your friends or your fans at least. So they would like to, when you launch something, if you hit them, they have the resonance with it. So they should be able to share it, right? Another thing is just like the Xiaomi cell phone. I just take it for example. Those fans are also very enthusiastic. They will introduce this product to their friends. So that's the way that they bring in new consumers. Yeah. So I think when we are talking about how to generate insights from the consumers, we also think about how to create the actions from our consumers that together, like the marketing, together work with consumers to promote the product and the brand.
So, thanks, Roy. I think you made an interesting point. I just want to add to that and to the gentleman's question there. I think let's all get real now that the era of marketing has irrevocably changed, and most consumers are not thinking of brands at all. Let's first acknowledge this reality. In banking, we used to say, nobody gets up in the morning thinking, hey, let me walk up to my branch or my ATM or let me check my internet banking app. That is fulfilling certain other needs. So the first thing is we need to get real about most consumers are not thinking about us, unless you are probably a Facebook or one of those which has been embedded into their lifestyle. Having said that, a couple of things Roy spoke about going viral, and that is a big, big change. That one-way communication model is either dying or pretty much dead. And I briefly alluded to it in my presentation yesterday when I spoke about influencer marketing. The idea that within your social network, you can call them KPIs, key persons of influence or whatever. There are people whom you trust much more than a celebrity, than a brand, than anybody, than a sports star out there, whose words carry much more authenticity for you and where there is an opportunity for you to resonate and also go viral. The second thing is, because most people are not thinking about brands or products, you have to make it smart and very contextual, and we can go on and on about it. But let me give you an example. And again, I'll quote examples from banking because it's one of the most financial services and insurance is one of the most boring industry. Nobody thinks about it. But there was a bank in Australia which wanted to promote or grow its mortgage business. Nobody thinks about mortgage. It's a high decision item, and you can do all the advertising you want on television. It'll probably yield you nothing. What they did was they did an augmented reality campaign where guys who are going to a particular neighborhood, if they see certain homes that they like, then suddenly their glass or their device, their mobile phone, will show specs or details about that particular home, and then it'll automatically show you, hey, what you can actually afford it based on your other, social data that we spoke about. This is your monthly mortgage. This is affordable, and this is what you're eligible for at this particular rate. Now see the way in which context is driving interest in the product versus they could have gone on endlessly through traditional advertising saying, mortgage for 6%. Right. I doubt most people would have cared.
So any perspectives to add before we close the session? Because I think we are pretty much done here. I think we have run out of time for any more questions. So I'll have to say thank you to the guys who gave great perspectives, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
Thank you.